Hi, in this video I want to talk about the Sony a5000, this camera here. I think this camera is still relevant in the year 2025 and beyond. It is an amazing camera for its price. You probably can purchase it around $100 used or $150 Canadian used. Depending on where you find it in the marketplace, this is a bargain camera. Now with the lens included, it might be a bit more, maybe another $50 to $100 more depending on what type of lens you have. I have a kit lens right here. Now with other accessory add-on to this camera, I think this camera is actually a beast. Let's talk about it right now. Alright, so if you have a Sony a5000 or you consider buying a Sony a5000, I think it's a good option if you're starting out doing YouTube and doing other social media content. This is actually an amazing camera, especially you can see here it's a flip screen. Now there's a lot of things in this camera that I think a lot of people don't know about. You know, for $100 US used or $150 Canadian used, this camera is a beast. If you have certain components or accessories, this camera can be quite amazing. Now to set it up, there are a few things that you need to know, right? For example, this camera is an APS-C camera, so it's a pretty big sensor camera. It brings a lot of light. Now because it's an old type of camera, it's gonna bring a lot of noise if you're not careful how you set it up. So let me give you advice when you do use this camera for YouTube or social media content. One thing you need to realize is that if you want a clear image, an image that is very good for 1080p, you need to set it properly. For example, you need to set your shutter speed at around 1/25, okay? A lot of people will say 150 is like that, you know, cinematic type of look or sorts of thing that they will say. But for, you know, YouTube, like talking head like this, 1/25 is more than adequate. In fact, that's all is needed. And you can see here, there's not much of ghosting. You know, when you're doing lower shutter speed, it seems to be like a motion blur kind of effect, dreamy like. For 1/25 shutter speed, I think it's perfect because you can bring an extra stop, so the exposure looks really good, so it's more brighter, right? And another thing that a lot of people will say to you, you need to have the aperture really wide. Now again, that's not true. If, for example, if you want to have focus, that's always correct, right? So you cannot really use autofocus on this camera because it's not that great. If you're doing it like moving around, especially when you're moving around like this, right? So don't depend on the autofocus. Now what I did was I set it to manual focus, and I have to make sure, of course, the lens itself is as wide as possible. So I'm setting it at 18 mils. Now this is a 18 to 55 mils kit lens, so that's fine. I set it to 18 mils, and that's quite wide. And the reason why you want it wide type of lens is because you can go into the lens and you can rotate manually. Okay, so I'm sitting about almost, I would say, close to a meter, and I can actually rotate my lens and allow it to adjust accordingly. And I have this focus peaking red, and then I can actually zoom in and see if I'm in focus or not. And I keep it focused, right? As long as I'm not moving too much. Now there is a trick. If you do move a lot like this, back and forth like that, then what I would suggest you do is bring down the aperture to f4 or f5, and that's what I did. So don't listen to a lot of YouTubers. They said to have a you know, shallow depth of field. That's not really true if you want to be in focus all the time. And you know, it doesn't matter if you can't blur the background if the background is not interesting anyway. Okay, so don't worry about background blur. You're not making a movie. You're just doing a YouTube talking like me right now, a talking head. Okay, so f4, f5, you will always be in focus, especially if you manually focus and then you move a little bit back and forth like this. See, I'm always in focus. So keep that in mind. Shutter speed 1/25, the aperture f5 is where I set it at. The ISO, again, this is an old camera. You shouldn't have it higher than, I would say, 800. Okay, I would set mine actually between 100 to 400. So I have this auto ISO at 100 to 400. I usually set it fixed at 400. Okay, and now you probably wonder that's going to be very dark, right? So that's okay. So this is why you probably need an LED light. I have it right up here, but you get one of these, and you're always gonna have bright scenes. Okay, this is very important. If you can't control the light environment, then bring in artificial light, okay, or film in the daytime. This is very important. Instead of like trying to get the camera that can, set to the highest ISO. I think that's not the right technique. A lot of filmmakers, they actually control light by introducing light from outside, for example, artificial light and all that, and they control those light instead of controlling the camera itself. So ISO 400 for Sony a5000. Okay, this is very important. I think a lot of people misunderstand that you have to have highest ISO, and then will kind of spoil, right? With a Sony FX3 or FX6 and FX9. They are a very good low light camera, but we have a budget, and therefore we don't need that kind of expensive camera. All right, so let's have a look at the camera now. I'm going to show you the menu. You can look it up here. Now I'm going to go over the menu, and you can see that in the first menu, number 1, go to shoot mode. It's at manual exposure. Okay, so you want to set to manual exposure. So I like a camera setting instead of a movie setting. That's very important. The reason for that, when you set into the photography or manual setting, is manual exposure. You have more control over the camera, right? The image size is set to 20 megapixels. Aspect ratio, I always set it to 3 to 2 ratio. You can also change it to, let's see, 16 by 9 if you like, but that's up to you. And then if you look at the quality, this is for photography, you can set to RAW and JPEG. So right now I want to focus more on the video, so we don't deal with that too much here. Now this is where I want to show you the file format is AVCHD. It's an old type of format which is compatible to many media, especially the older ones. For example, you can burn this format into a Blu-ray, which is for people who watch movies on a Blu-ray. This is great. Okay, 1080p, high quality. And the record setting, I set it to 24 frames per second. Actually, it's 23.98, but they set 24p here. And you can see that its codecs rate is about 24 megabits per second. It's pretty good. And let's see, what else is important here? Yeah, in focus mode, I set it to manual focus. And you can see that. Don't worry about the focus area because that's for autofocus. Doesn't concern us too much. Now notice the ISO auto. If you click on it, I set it to ISO 100 to 400, right? So that's the minimum 100 and ISO 400, okay? So that's what you want to do. And then if you go to custom balance, very important as well. That's another thing. Make sure you have a white card. Okay, if you don't have a white card, just use a white piece of paper. And then you want to do a custom white balance. As you can see here, you want to go to click on set. And then when you click on it, you put a white paper in front of the camera and it will set, right? So that's what I did there. And now it's adjust accordingly. So now the room lighting and all that is adjust according to the white balance. Okay, I would suggest you do that, especially if you're in a room setting like this. Okay, and then next thing I would do is, let's move on. Yeah, the dynamic range, I set it to DRO, dynamic range optimizer, level 5. Okay, that's what I did there. And then creative style, I set it to standard. And notice that in the standard, I will set the contrast to -3, the saturation +1, and the sharpness -3. Okay, So for this camera, for example, you don't want it too sharp, and you don't want it to have too much contrast. I think actually for the contrast I set to -1. Okay, -1. I think you need a bit of contrast. I find that if you -3, then it looks a bit washed out. So yeah, I set it to -1, the saturation +1, and the sharpness -3. Okay. Again, it's up to you. It's up to your style how you want to set it up. So the next thing we want to see is the high ISO noise reduction. I set it to low, so we don't want to have it too much reducing noise because it looks kind of fake. It's smooth out, like for example your skin. Just leave that. Notice also the smile and face detection is turned off. Soft skin effect especially should be turned off for sure. Okay, we want that natural look, not smoothing look, and it makes the camera, actually the image, look funny. Okay, in fact, I find that if you put that on, there's something about the camera. It actually kind of like it waves, like it fluctuates. Okay, so your skin looks like it's rough, and then it's smooth, rough, smooth. So something's happening with the software there. I find that it's not doing a good job. It's not completely smooth all the way through the video. In fact, there's a resonance of this smoothness and then roughness of the skin. So just turn that off. Steady shot is on, depending on your type of lens you have. Okay, because the camera itself doesn't have in-body stabilization, so it's depending on the lens itself. All right. Other than that, I think that's all I did. A zebra I set to 70, and manual focus assist is on, and focus magnification time is on no limit. So for example, if you're trying to manual focus, it will stay as manual focus until you press the shutter button, right? Otherwise, after 3 seconds, it will go back to the normal view. I set the grid line to rule of thirds so I can see where I center or not. Okay, great for framing. Right, auto review I set to 10 seconds. Yeah, and then peaking level I set to high, and the color I use is red. Usually red is a good set for focus peaking. Okay, and then other than that, everything looks all right. I wouldn't worry too much about the rest. Okay, and that's how I set up this camera here. Okay, lighting, you might need that for this camera. On that, this is a great camera. Now just be careful with the overheating. This camera do overheat after a while. I would say around 20-25 minutes it will start to overheat. So the best thing to do is maybe get external power. You want to invest maybe a battery connector to the camera that's gonna supply it externally, and I find that doesn't affect its overheating. But yeah, if you're using the battery itself and it's recording after 25 minutes, it does show up. The heating signal will show that it's gonna turn itself off very soon. All right, I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up and a heart of appreciation. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.